I'm here with the 79 Mesa boogie. I just knocked the picks all off the amp and all over the floor. Guitar players know what that's like. Hopefully I can find them when I'm done with this video. So this is a 79. And it just came back last week from having quite a bit of work done to it. It was pretty messed up. All along I was told there was something lacking in my amp. It was not running like a Mesa should be. In other words, it had no balls. As I was quoted once. I'll just quickly go over what everything does. We have the input for your guitar, and we have a foot switch. This foot switch, you could get two foot switch options. One that would allow you to switch between your EQ and your reverb, and that's a pain in the butt. I don't have that one. But you couldn't use both of them together. There's an issue. It also, the one that I have allows you to switch between channel 1, your rhythm channel, to channel 2, your lead channel. Now your lead channel doesn't have access to the reverb. Just like your normal channel doesn't have access to the EQ. Even on the lead channel, you really couldn't use the EQ because the EQ hummed really loudly to the point where it wasn't really usable. There's still a bit of a hum from the EQ. And there's some hum, but not a lot from the reverb. Both of these now are livable and whatnot. So we have a bright switch in your master 1, so you pull it out, and, well, it works like a bright switch. You have a shift and treble, and when you pull the shift knob, it moves the treble from where it is normally in the preamp section somewhere else down the line. I think it changes the spots with the bass. So you have the bass. The bass doesn't have any pull knobs. Same thing with your mids. There's no pull knobs. That's pretty basic on most amplifiers. Your mids, your trebles, your bass. So some of them are just a single tone knob. You have your master volume 1, which would normally just control your overall amp. No, it would control your lead channel, your rhythm channel, I mean, and you use your volume 1 to control what your amp was at. And it's also a gain boost, which is great because I live in an apartment, so I can't utilize that master like it's supposed to, so I have it at 1. And it's not really loud until you pull out the gain boost, and it's actually playable. It's playable. You can hear it. It sounds good. It does what it's supposed to. with a little help from the gain boost. Then you have your lead drive and push lead. So when you pull this out, you're no longer on the rhythm channel, you're on the lead channel. But the higher you put this up, the more gain you have. Now I simply have this at 5 because I don't run the master volume up very loud. So the gain circuit's not going to work like it should with your amp basically on idle. Now, then we have another bright switch and lead master. So this will control your volume specifically on your lead channel, and then you'd have to try to move this to get your gain, and that was a pain because if you were suppose you were playing and you needed your gain channel for a solo. Due to the way that functioned, when you shifted from your lead to your rhythm, or your rhythm to your lead, you get this really loud popping noise. And the popping noise has to do with the type of relay Mesa used at the time. But on top of that, there's this huge volume difference, which you can either get a massive increase in the volume, which is not cool, or a massive decrease in the volume, which again is not cool. Some of the things, I guess I should continue what everything does. We have here a bunch of other switches. Oh, that's your reverb. We have here an EQ in or EQ out. I like playing it with the EQ in. It's a little quieter with the EQ out, but I find it's nicer to color up the guitar sound on your way into the preamp and not the way out of your preamp. Then you have this, which allows you to switch it from 100 watts RMS to 60 watts RMS. And this is your standby, and this is your power. Now, you switch it around. You have this, which goes into a little fan, but the fan's loud because it's a fan. And they make fan noises, for those who don't know. But this fan will plug into this little outlet here. You have your fuse. You have your ground, which is not really useful anymore because it's been converted to a 3-prong. As you can see, this is not the original cable. You have a slave output, slave level. And I'm not 100% sure how that actually works, because I've seen it once, and I'm pretty sure it just allows you to run another head through it, and whether it uses the preamp stage or the power amp section of the other amp, I'm not 100% sure. Then you have your presence knobs, which Fender dropped, I think, when they went to the blackface. Presence is kind of cool. I have my presence at 0. And right here, you can't see it, but there's a little black cap here. And it's marked off, that's his reverb, because most of these the reverb option, the knob was on the back. Something that makes my Mesa a little special is it's the blonde Tolax. They were normally black, and it has the stock electric voice speaker, and it's a 15-inch versus the 12-inch that normally would come. I was talking to Richard. Don't ask me how to pronounce his last name, because I'm not going to bother even trying to. But Richard worked at Mesa Boogie, and I emailed him many years ago because I wanted to get the amp recapped and retuned. But due to financial situations in the time, I was unable to do that. And Richard told me it was a custom order because most of the reverbs were in the back. They didn't come with the EQ or the 15-inch speaker. And at the time, everything they put out had to be called in ordered to specifications. They weren't doing full-out mass productions yet. So, yeah, it was kind of like, we want this, but there's going to be a wait because we actually have to build it because there's none in stock, because we don't supply these to the public in a mass production yet. Which I think is pretty cool. Now, this is ran off of 46L6 tubes, and the rest are 12AX7 and a 12AT7. You can have the 12AT7 switch to another tube by a little toggle switch under the chassis. But I can't remember offhand on what that specific tube is, because it's just that. Some of the biggest problems with the Mesa before I took it in was the fact that there was no gain stage. You had to almost have your amp full, and you need at least 5 to 7 before you could even get anything out of the gain, which was weird. And it annoyed me for years because Mesas are supposed to be this high gain amplifier, and I have this Mesa here that it wasn't. There was no gain stage. And when I took it to Buddy's house, who done the work to it, he messaged me with a bunch of pictures, and he says, this is what this is supposed to look like. If I can figure out how to do some editing, I'll show some before and after photos. And he says, this is what it looks like. And he showed me this really sloppy wiring and mod that was done to the amp. And it was really discouraging because I ended up taking it to someone's house who was supposedly a really good tech. And he let it come home like that, and he didn't bother even asking if I wanted it reverted back to stock, because he said it was not stock. So I figured it was just a everyday mod. But when I took it to this fella, he said, "This is so messed up. I can't leave it like this." He says, "I have no choice but to bring it back to stock." And I was glad to hear that, because I'm not a huge fan of these modifications, especially a modification that has been done poorly, which in this case, this was. I also showed pictures to another well-known amp builder in Atlantic, Canada, and his words was, "Wow, your amp has been botched. That's terrible." So, it was something to hear that the amp I loved for years was so utterly messed up. And that seriously was discouraging. But then I got thinking, if I liked the amp and it wasn't working properly, what is it going to be like when it's actually working? And I was blown out of the water when we went to the tech and he was walking us through it. Now, to get to what the tech has done to really help make this old amp, which was known to be really fussy and noisy, to a more user-friendly amplifier. This is where things get interesting. So, remember earlier in the video, I was telling you that the lead master and the master one were kind of fighting against each other for dominant volume. Well, now there is only one master volume, dedicated master volume, and that's this. This lead master is now just a normal volume that just affects your lead. So I have it at 7 because I have volume 1 at 7. So you can actually shift between the channels and you don't get that loud pop anymore because it's not fighting in different volume levels. There's one thing he did. The second thing he did was he shielded, put some shielding. How did he wear that? He put a plate. Did something with the EQ to help isolate some of the noise, properly ground it as best as the capability, because it's an early Mesa. They were doing a lot of experiments. They weren't really in their game yet. So he basically cut the hum in the EQ by half. I'm very satisfied, even though there is still some hum left in the EQ. But I understand. You can't get rid of all that unless you actually basically turn into a Mach 4, Mark 4, or something like that. And I wasn't doing that because I wanted this thing to be as close to original as I could without having any real issues. Now, my reverb hissed to the point where it almost wasn't usable. You couldn't hear it over the hissing noise of reverb. Come to find out, the reverb was plugged in backwards to begin with, and the positioning of the reverb tank was interfering with the transformer. So he moved that to get it away from its original location. And again, that cut the hum down by half, and he also flipped the reverb tank around to decrease the hum. And now you actually have a gain stage, and it screams, it really does.